Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 2 on my channel, Courageous Communication. Today, I am pleased to welcome a new friend, Karla Solomon, to the channel. Karla is a wife and mother of 3 who works as an outreach specialist at Mercy Grace Ministries. She is a member of the Human Trafficking Survivor Leader Council for the Office of the Governor of the state of Texas and serves on numerous boards for nonprofits, including A21 and Unbound. She is a survivor consultant for the Department of Homeland Security and the Polaris Project. She is a survivor of child sex trafficking and adult exploitation. And today she's going to share her courageous story of survival and give all of us valuable information to help combat human trafficking. So help me welcome Karla Solomon.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We had some weird glitch technical difficulties at first. I don't know if you heard that. So hopefully it came through. It looks like we're live now, so I'm excited for that. But Karla, I'm just going to kind of turn this over to you and give you space for you to tell your story and give us any information you would like to have. And then we'll kind of look for some questions towards the end. Okay.
Awesome.
Right.
So hello, everyone. And thank you guys thank you, Jessica, for inviting me into this space to share with you guys. The topic that we discuss here today is very important to me. Not only is it my passion and the work that I do now, but this used to be my lifestyle. So there are definitely many more people in slavery today than at any time in human history. And it's estimated that over 27 million people are currently being trafficked worldwide, and majority of those are women and children. And although slavery is illegal in every country in this modern world, slavery still exists. Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Traffickers often use violence, manipulation, false promises, or romantic relationships to lure victims into a trafficking situation. Exploitation, human trafficking, and modern-day slavery are all used as umbrella terms to refer to both sex trafficking and compelled or forced labor. So I myself am a survivor of child sex trafficking and adult exploitation, like Jessica said, and I'm here to share with you guys today what modern day slavery really looks like from a victim's perspective. So at a young age, I was taken from my mom by my grandparents. My real dad has not been in the picture since I was a small baby. But my grandparents found out that I had been sexually abused and I was not being cared for properly. And one of my aunts eventually got legal guardianship of me. So I lived with my aunt from the time that I was 4 until I was 11 years old. Life was good. I had structure that every child needs. I was well cared for. But whenever I got a little bit older, I started asking my aunt questions of why my mom didn't care enough to call me or make plans to see me. And the answers I received to those questions were nothing short of, she doesn't really love you. She loves men and drugs more than you. So my aunt always made me feel like a burden to her. She made me feel like if my mom would just get her stuff together, that she wouldn't have to provide for me or spend money on me. And, you know, if anybody is out there that cares for a child that is not yours, please do not condemn or place blame for them for what their parents can't do. I started acting out at 11, and I was eventually abandoned by my aunt once again. So she basically got tired of my stuff. I had started stealing cigarettes out of the freezer from her and giving them to the older girl down the street, and I would lie about it and things like that. And she thought I was doing a lot of really bad stuff, but I was actually being influenced by someone down the street from us. So she dropped me off at my mom's doorstep with a backpack full of clothes. And she told me she wanted me to know what it felt like to live poorly. I was only 11, and inside the house, my mom and new stepdad were very much into drug addiction, and they were very violent with each other. And this was behavior I had never seen before, and it scared me. So I ran away for the first time when I was 11 years old. An older lady approached me shortly after I had left. I had only been gone a couple hours, but she knew my mom. She lived down the street from us, and she started to build a relationship with me to the point that I called her mom number two. She made me sandwiches after school. I really thought that she truly cared about me. And she slowly introduced me to drugs and older boys. Eventually, I was raped at one of these parties. And I actually had this realization later in life that she had actually sold my virginity at that party. And after that incident, my life and everything around me started to spiral out of control. She would sell me to her drug dealers or men that were seeking to fulfill their disturbing fantasies. There was many times that she would send a guy that I did not know to school to pick me up. And that was so that they could take me home with them. And at first, I actually continued to go to school. But I eventually started being made fun of because I would share with my peers what I was doing. And, I was not accepted in that realm the way that I was accepted by this older woman. So I started being made fun of. They started calling me names, and I started to get shunned at school. And then all of my so-called friends would see me being picked up by different guys, throughout the day or throughout school year. And they knew what was going on, but nobody ever said anything to the teachers. No, and I didn't either. I was too scared to. So I was in 6th grade, and I thought everything that I was doing was actually normal. It was an adult that was telling me to do these things. So, and I really thought that she cared about me, and I became that outcast, the one that had no friends. So I basically stopped going to school. This woman, she actually used the money she made for her personal drug use. And then she made me try the same drug. And it was the exact same drug that I was running away from home to get away from. Like I said, I eventually stopped going to school. And at that moment, it seemed like nobody even noticed that I was gone from school. I was finally able to get away from this woman whenever at the time, her daughter was 18. And she intervened and shared with me the disturbing truth of what her mother had done to her since she was a very small girl, which was sell her daughter. But I escaped her just to live on the streets and exchange the use of my body for food and shelter. I wasn't allowed to go back to my mom's. So I lived on the streets from the time that I was 12 until I was 14. At 14, I ended up pregnant. I actually ended up lying to an older man to have what I thought was going to be a safe place to stay. I didn't see the issue with it then because I was never taught any better or any different, but this was a 27-year-old man with a 14-year-old girl. That's not normal. That is disturbing. So he actually became very violent with me whenever he started to realize that my son was not his child. You could see a drastic difference just in the color of his skin. But I had nowhere else to go. I knew I had to leave, but I didn't have anywhere to go. So I endured this treatment from him for 5 years. So whenever my son was 4 years old, I actually met my husband through the ugly process of leaving this other guy. My husband has been and always will be my knight in shining armor. We actually got married after 5 years. We had 2 more kids together, and you would think that that would be the happily ever after moment. But the sad thing is that I had never dealt with my childhood trauma. I never knew the effects that it had on my life. I was never shown or taught what a healthy relationship was growing up. Um, and I lived with the trauma itself and the effects of it for so long that I thought that that was normal. I thought it was normal to throw things and have outbursts and freak out for no reason, and all of these beliefs that were distorted that I had about sex equaling love, you know. So I was 29 years old. I was a general manager for a restaurant. I was going to college full time. I had a teenager, a toddler, and an infant in the house. So feeling overwhelmed is probably an understatement. But I did the one thing that I knew how to do very, very well, and I ran. I was selfish and I ran away from my husband. I ran away from my kids, and I got into some crazy situations. During all of that chaos and separation from my family and people that really knew me, I met someone who portrayed himself to be Mr. Prince Charming. At first, he sold me the false dream. He spent lots of money to pamper me. He would buy me things that I could never afford otherwise. He took me places that I always wanted to go. And it wasn't just the material things. He listened to me. He wanted to know me and everything about me, my hopes, my dreams, my likes, my dislikes. He wanted to know what made me tick, what made me happy. He wanted to know everything that made me me. He had started to create this relationship with an intent to use those vulnerabilities against me. And little did I know, he already knew exactly who I was. He knew who I was married to. He knew how many kids we had. He actually went to school with my husband years before this. And in this moment, I didn't even know this man's real name. And maybe I didn't care because in that moment, all of the attention that he gave me, all of the things that he did for me, the money he spent on me, and the places he took me, it was almost like that blinded me to the truth of what was really going on. But on top of that, I had never been taught anything like this, and I honestly had no idea. And I remember thinking in those moments, this is just too good to be true. And my gut feeling was actually right. One day, this Prince Charming turns into a monster. He introduced me to his world. He took me to a spot in Baton Rouge known for prostitution and drugs. And he picked up a young girl, maybe 16, 17 years old. His demeanor, his personality, everything changed about him as soon as she got into the car. He was very demanding and harsh, and not this soft, sweet-spoken person that he had been the past couple of weeks. And I'll be honest, I was scared to help her, but I didn't know what to do. So after about a week of constantly driving them around, she got beat up really badly one night because she got back in the car and she didn't have money for him. All I could do was watch from my rearview mirror as he drug her out of my car and beat her. That night, everything changed. Afterwards, when he made me leave her there on the side of the road, and he took me back to the hotel room that he had. And there he placed an ad online on Backpage.com. Backpage is a online site that has since been shut down by the FBI for soliciting sex online. On the ad, he named me Alexia, the Australian princess. And he used blurred out face pictures of a girl off of a porn site that looked similar to me. He even started calling me Alexia instead of my real name. He told me I had to dye my hair blonde. I remember trying to leave that night as he was posting this ad, and I remember him stopping me and just whispering in my ear and kissing me gently and telling me how much he needed me, how much he loved me, and how much he just needed me to do this one time. After I did it the first time, I got back into the car, and immediately he tells me that I have a quota of $1,500 a day. And if I don't meet that quota, there was going to be punishment. and he drove me to a remote place to show me what that punishment entailed. He wanted me to dress a certain way. He took my social security card and my driver's license from me, as well as anything of value, money, jewelry, including my wedding ring. He started coaching me to talk differently and act differently. Sometimes I wouldn't know what to say, so I would just look at him and let him speak for me because I didn't want to say the wrong thing and get hurt. He trained me on how to respect him by walking in front of him and always looking down and not making eye contact with anyone. He always made me wear clothes that showed way too much. He claimed that I was a walking advertisement board. He ended up introducing me to methamphetamine. He traveled me across states from Louisiana all the way to Colorado and stopped at every major city in between. He broke my ribs in College Station, Texas, because I shut a door without permission. He refused to take me to the hospital for my ribs, and I could actually feel the broken bones inside my chest. I got the guts, and I actually ran when we got back to Houston, but I didn't get very far. I called my husband, and I told him everything that was going on. And while I was telling him what was going on, I started getting messages from this guy telling me that if I didn't come back, that he was going to take my 5-year-old daughter and do the same thing to her. He even sent the location of where she gets on and off of a school bus. So I screenshot all of these messages and I sent them to my husband and I told him goodbye. And I told him that I have to go back to protect our daughter. I didn't know, but my husband did the best thing he could have possibly done in that moment, and he called the police. Whenever I went back to this guy, things got way worse. In a College Station hotel bathtub, I probably weighed not even 100 pounds. I was in so much pain, and I would constantly sit in scalding hot water because no matter how hot the water or how hard I scrubbed my body, I still felt dirty. I was fumbling through my purse while I was in the bathtub, and like I said, he had already taken everything of value from me, but I found this cross pendant. It was just there. And I remember looking at it. This is something that I bought my husband for our anniversary years before. It has the Lord's Prayer etched into it. And I remember looking at that cross, and immediately I looked up at the ceiling, and all I said was, I can't take this anymore.
Take your time.
I was recovered 3 days later, walking out of this hotel by law enforcement. They were actually screaming my name down the hallway, saying, Karla Solomon, stop. And I didn't even flinch. It didn't even register in my head that they were talking to me. It took an officer actually getting right in front of my face and asked me if my name was Karla Solomon for me to realize that I'm not Alexia. I remember telling the police after I collapsed on the ground outside that they had saved my life, and they did. 2 ladies from Department of Public Safety, State Trooper Angie Fontaine and Kristen Ipes, they took me to the hospital. They stayed with me the whole time, held my hand through all of my exams, all of everything. But my healing journey afterwards was really so much harder than just surviving what I went through. I experienced trauma bond, or some people know that as Stockholm syndrome, which is very disturbing for me mentally and emotionally. Like, I went home and I literally hid in my house for 7 months. I wouldn't even walk outside. Words cannot describe the terror and fear that I felt. And the thing is at this point in my life, he had been arrested, but they didn't charge him with anything in that moment, that day. So he had bonded out on a lesser charge. But by this time, he was on the run and facing charges for human trafficking. And he actually ended up making the top 10 Texas most wanted list um, as a wanted person here in Texas for charges of human trafficking. But things got really, really ugly before they got better. I couldn't handle the memories that tormented me constantly. And I honestly thought the only way out was suicide. So I took a whole bottle of my anxiety meds. I took a whole bottle of Xanax. And right after I did that, a new friend that I had just met through victim services, someone that had donated a bunch of school clothes and supplies to my children, she called me to check on me. And I broke down that day and I told her everything. I told her everything I had been through. I told her about the pills that I had just swallowed. And she prayed with me. She prayed with me, and I rededicated my life to God that day. And I tell a lot of people that that was the day in October 4th of 2017 that I tried to throw in the towel, and God threw it in my face and said, "No, girl, you got work to do." I experienced a radical, immediate change. And the next day, I left the house. I got a job. I went to work the day after that. And I started to live life in a completely different way through a completely different viewpoint. So today, my oldest son is a full-time student at LSU. He is double majoring in physics, and he is part of an international work study program through NASA. Go Tigers. I know we're in Texas, but I got to represent for my baby. So my other two children are elementary age still, and they are living at home with me and my husband. By the way, me and my husband's relationship is probably the absolute best that it has ever been. My mom and I now have an amazing relationship, even after all the craziness. She and my stepdad are now sober, and they are amazing grandparents to my kids. Today, I know Jessica already shared, I work in this field full time, probably more than full time. There's a lot of different projects and organizations and entities that I actively participate in to help fight this, as far as awareness, outreach, whatever that looks like. My trafficker, whose real name is Herman Fox, was finally recovered in Kentucky, and he was charged here in the state of Texas, and he accepted a plea offer for 30 years for charges related to human trafficking. I have to say that after I actually learned what human trafficking was, I was able to then make the realization that what happened to me was not my fault. All the dots connected, and I was really able to understand for the first time in my life what I had went through. I do not believe for 1 second that anyone in this lifestyle wants to truly be there. None of us had a dream or a desire to be in a situation like that. Nobody ever answered the question to what do you want to be when you grow up, as I want to be a prostitute, right? We all have hopes and dreams, talents, and abilities. And most people in this space, though, feel that that's all they're worth, or they don't deserve any better, or this is a consequence of a situation, that they've experienced, as far as poverty, drug addiction, generational things that have come down the line from family. But sometimes it's really because they are told to believe that they're not any better than that. Many are not taught any differently, or they grow up with the belief that this lifestyle is a consequence of a vulnerable or unfortunate situation that they have been in or experienced day to day. And many of them have also suffered from trauma on top of that. So many don't even realize that there is a way out, or escaping can oftentimes be impossible for many different reasons. My daughter was threatened. So if that meant that I had to smile and tell people that I was out there by my own free will and free choice, then shaming that myself in that moment was way better than facing the consequence or the punishment that could have been waiting for me or my daughter if I had said any different. And just for some clarification purposes, when an adult engages in a commercial sex act, such as prostitution, as a result of force, threats of force, fraud, coercion, or any combination of those means, that person is still a victim of trafficking. A child engaged in any type of sex act, forced or manipulated, is trafficking. There is no way that blame can be placed on a child who isn't even old enough by law to consent to sex. So, under such circumstances, a perpetrator that is involved in recruiting, harboring, enticing, transporting, providing, obtaining, patronizing, soliciting, or maintaining a person for those purposes are guilty themselves of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking also occurs through a specific form of coercion whereby most individuals are compelled to continue in prostitution through the use and manipulation of an unlawful debt, which is actually incurred through their own transportation, their own recruitment, and their own sale. So these women are basically told that because so if I was a trafficker and I'm telling this girl, because I transport you this place, because I feed you, because I am the person looking out for you, there is a fee you have to pay me. And that fee never diminishes, so they're being charged for their own sale. And these exploiters actually insist that they pay off these crazy debts before they can be freed. That's why it's so hard also to get out. Even if an adult initially consents to participate in prostitution, so even though like at the very beginning I consented, whenever there came a point that I was subsequently held in service through psychological manipulation or physical force, that's what made me a trafficking victim. Many people don't understand that. I really don't think that, like I said before, that anybody is out there by free choice. This was nobody's dream. This is nothing that anybody would want to happen to them. Nobody's signing up for this, okay? Many misconceptions are that it doesn't happen here or not even in this country, or that trafficking looks like the movie Taken, which is, or even the white van at Walmart. Oh gosh, let's go there. So even the white van at Walmart, the one sticking zip ties on your door handle and stuff. No, this is not how this is happening, okay? A relationship is needed to exploit someone because it is very, very small percentage that are actually abducted or kidnapped. That's not how it happens, guys, okay? It happens through building a relationship, grooming, and then exploiting after a certain relationship and trust is built through that. So human trafficking, like I said, human trafficking rarely happens through abduction. But there's also the myth that people believe it's not in my backyard. Let me be the one to tell you guys, it's everywhere. It might look a little bit differently than what most are expecting or even understand how to see. Like it does not look like the movie Taken. It does not look like somebody grabbing someone off of the street. It's not like that. This is somebody that is online, possibly talking to your child, building a relationship, but also giving this false representation of mom and dad don't love you, but I love you. And it puts this separation and this barrier in between you and the people that really do love you. And that's how that trauma bond starts to form also, because the person then starts to believe that their trafficker is the only one that loves them. I can't count how the issue is that usually the person that's doing this exploitation is somebody very, very close to us, somebody that we love, And that's what makes it so hard to accept or even realize to believe. And I can't count, you guys, how many people I seen in public as a child and as an adult. And deep down, I was hoping and praying that someone would notice something not right there and that it would be reported and that I would have been rescued a lot sooner than I was. And I often wonder how many of those people looked at me in the situation and knew that something was wrong, but didn't know what to do about it or what it was even called. I know I didn't. So I've got some stuff that I can share with you guys. I didn't know how much time we still had.
We're good.
Okay. So just some specifics and educational stuff that I wanted to share. The crime of human trafficking hinges on the exploitation of another person. So human trafficking does not require transportation in order to be considered a crime of human trafficking. It is a crime that can be committed against an individual that's never even left their hometown. Human trafficking victims can be any age, race, gender, identity, ethnicity, sex, nationality, immigration status, socioeconomic class. It does not matter. It does not discriminate. Human trafficking forcefully converts a human being to be a commodity through sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, domestic servitude, forced marriage, forced criminality, and even organ harvesting falls under the human trafficking umbrella. According to a study of the U.S. Department of Justice, human trafficking task force cases, it says that 83% of sex trafficking victims identified in the United States were actually U.S. citizens. So this is here. It may not look like somebody from another part of the world. And the disturbing part is that Americans are top consumers. The demand is right here. This is the top demand right here in America. Human trafficking is actually the only industry in which the supply and demand are the exact same thing, the sale of a human being. Human trafficking actually earns global profits of roughly $150 billion a year. Globally, it is estimated that 71% of enslaved people are women and girls, while the other 29% are men and boys. This same study also found that the average age that a trafficked victim is first used for commercial sex was between 12 and 14 years old. For me, I had just turned 12 when I was raped at the party. Some victims that I know, some victims are as young as 9 when this starts. And since I've actually been in this field and working with children also, I've actually even heard a 5-year-old's story of exploitation. From what I've seen with working with adults is that every single person, every single one, you guys, I have not encountered one adult person that has been sexually exploited that has not experienced some sort of sexual trauma in their childhood. And I've worked with many, many survivors. So on average, a victim is sold 5 to 6 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That totals over 2,000 sex acts per year. The average daily quota is $2,000 per day, which equals $730,000 for one victim for 1 year. And that's all profit because you never have to replenish your stock, if that makes sense. So a couple ways to identify human trafficking. Something that I always say at my educational presentations is know your ABCs, know your appearance, behavior, and communication. Those are the 3 things that you are really trying to pay attention to. Excuse me. I'm going to go through a couple under each category. And this is not all of them. This is just some that really stand out. So for appearance, a boyfriend or girlfriend who is dominating and maintains close physical contact. Clothing could be too sexual, wrong size, popular name brand, but not appropriate for their age. Weather, location, but please take note that not all victims are made to dress this way. Signs of physical abuse, such as burns, bruises, or cuts. Sometimes they even use makeup to cover up these injuries. I know that I had many bruises on my face and on my legs. I know that's an odd place to have them, but when you're trying to cover your body from blows, that's kind of where it gets connected. So I would take makeup and cake it on so thick, and you could still see the dark bruising underneath the makeup. So expensive material possessions that's appeared to be out of the ordinary. So whenever I was younger, this lady, when she would sell me to these drug dealers and stuff, she would here and there, every now and again, buy me something really expensive, like a pocketbook or a pair of shoes or something that I really wanted. But I would pop up with these things, and immediately my mom, even though she was in addiction herself, she would still, accuse me, "Are you stealing from the mall? Like, where'd you get this?" She was still questioning about where I got it. But those possessions, when you start seeing your kid come home with things you did not buy, that is a big red flag. Other things like signs of poor hygiene, they may look sick or emaciated, always carrying like very few or no personal belongings. Everything that I owned at that time in my life fit in a backpack, nothing else. It was too much to carry anything else. Sometimes we've noticed that recently these people like to put branding tattoos. Sorry, I hear them getting loud out there. So they do, sometimes you'll see branding tattoos. Some of the normal ones that we have seen are money symbols, barcodes, bunny ears, street names, black roses, and the word daddy has been something very common also. So with behavior, they're always going to be fearful, timid, submissive to another person, visibly at unease or even paranoid around like law enforcement, security, anybody of authority. They would, their outside appearance, their behavior itself, their body language is going to seem to be very withdrawn. They will appear to be very sad, afraid, disoriented, confused, even anxious sometimes. And signs of substance and alcohol abuse are most likely present. Something I've told a lot of people in law enforcement that I work with also say the same thing. Anywhere where you find drugs present, you will find trafficking and exploitation present as well. The two kind of go hand in hand, just the same way that organized criminality or organized crime would play with many different aspects of that criminal dark world, whatever you want to call it. But typically, wherever you're going to find, especially those high-powered, strong drugs like methamphetamine, you are going to find trafficking as well. Because we've seen all too much things like mothers that get hooked on methamphetamine, for instance, and they get to a place that they cannot continue to pay for that habit. So what is something that they would do to make that money? And it's not uncommon to see a mother selling her child for their drug use. So communication. So something that was really big with me is I always looked to the person for communication. When somebody would ask me a direct question, I would never answer. I would always look away and look at him to make sure that whatever I was about to say was acceptable. Okay. So I would also defer any kind of direct questions or attempts at conversation to him instead of answering or speaking for myself. That was basically not allowed. But that's not always the case. Does not make eye contact when spoken to. This was a huge indicator for me because he had so much manipulation and control over me that it was a constant habit to not look anybody in the face. I didn't know why. It took me a while to figure all that out, but like that was really hard for me because I am definitely a people person and I like to talk to people and I want to see your face. But, this was a different time in life. So, something else, like I was talking about, was the rehearsed answers. So whenever their answers appear to be rehearsed when asked specific questions. So like if you're asking your child, who is this person in your phone, or who is this person you're communicating with or hanging out with, and blah, blah, blah. And that answer doesn't seem realistic or like legit, or it just doesn't seem truthful. That's probably because the person has told them to tell you this, it's not anything that they've made up. And sometimes they even get nervous or even angry if you press in for like more details, especially if it's a child. Another thing is a lot of women in this lifestyle will claim to be working as a modeling agent, doing dancing or entertainment, hospitality industry. And they often refer to themselves as an escort rather than anything else. But the thing is they can tell you that they're doing these things, but when you ask for details about the job, they're not going to know any details about the job because that's obviously not what they're doing. So another thing, I know I went over it, but if a victim is under the age of 18 and engaged in commercial sex, doesn't matter if somebody is over them, it does not matter. That's human trafficking. And another thing that I think is a big one is if the victim is living in any type of like substandard housing, such as living in a car or living out of a hotel, in different spaces that you is just not what we would consider normal. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that people can get in bad situations. It's just, I lived out of hotels constantly. So that's why I say that. So in short, though, you're basically looking for behavior that is completely out of the norm from what we would consider to be normal behavior. And like I said, appearance, behavior, communication. So I'm almost done here, but many people ask me, why do they stay? Why don't they leave? Trauma bond is a psychological response to abuse. It occurs when the abused person forms an unhealthy bond with the person who abuses them. The person experiencing the abuse may develop sympathy for the abusive person, and then that becomes reinforced with cycles of abuse, and then that is followed by remorse. A trauma bond actually forms through intermittent displays of positive and negative attention. And it's confusing for the person on the other end of this because it basically results in a cognitive, not a disability. Distortion. There you go. That's the word. And it's actually like the victim starts to stay or continues to stay in an attempt to reach that positive point that they have experienced with this person once again. And the formation, I think something that people don't realize is that the formation of a trauma bond is something that is a gradual process that is worked up to. And once it gets, I'm not saying that it can't be broken. Obviously, I'm sitting right here, but it just, the longer it goes on, the stronger that bond becomes. And I usually refer to, what was that guy that I can't remember. It was one of those crazy stories, and the victim is actually in prison, and she still has a very strong trauma bond to the person that was abusing her that's also in prison. But like I said earlier, the victim truly believes that the trafficker is basically the only one that loves them.
Yeah.
So almost through here. Human trafficking is obviously a worldwide issue, and it's going to take communities everywhere to stand up against this injustice. Mm-hmm. So when you see something, please say something, you guys. Even if you aren't sure what it is, I work with many law enforcement agencies, and they all say that they would rather check something out and it turn out to be nothing, then it not be reported and it turned out to be something. And if you guys are seeking more information, I encourage you to check out the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign website. There's an abundance of valuable information, educational statistics, whatever you guys are really looking for. It's there. They even have suggested ways of talking to youth about this, and all of that information is on their website. There's also a new app called the Stop app, and the little icon for it is a hand. It's a handprint, and you can actually download this app to your phone and directly report anything that you're concerned with when it concerns human trafficking or exploitation.
Is that anonymous?
Yes, and you can actually screenshot. So let's say you're getting some disturbing messages on Instagram or something, or your kid is, you can actually screenshot these messages on your phone and send them directly to them, and it reports it to Homeland Security. So, and it filters down to the correct entity that it needs to go to be handled. And then lastly, I just want to share with you guys, with parents specifically, please, please, please do not rely on the school system to educate your children about sex, exploitation, and abuse. It is up to us as parents to empower them with the correct knowledge and the truth about these topics. It's a hard truth to realize and accept whenever I do presentations at school, and we ask all of these questions at the beginning to really show the parents, or the teachers, I'm sorry, a visual. We ask, who all has a phone? Stand up. And the whole auditorium will stand up. And then we ask, who has social media? If you don't have social media, sit down. Everybody's still standing. Parents are not realizing that these children have access to porn and so much more right there at their fingertips. But most of these children haven't even been through sexual education class, much less been taught internet safety. So I encourage every single parent, and even if you're not a parent, if you're an aunt, an uncle, whatever, educate these children, have these tough talks with your children, because if you aren't teaching them these realities and these truths, I promise you the internet is. Usually when I do big events and fundraisers, I usually close with my very favorite quote by Harriet Tubman. And she says, I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed thousands more if they only knew they were slaves. And you know, this quote actually rings true. And many, many individuals do not exactly identify as a victim in these situations. And it really does take courageous communication to create change and see others set free. Thank you, guys.
That was so good. Oh my gosh, so good. So guys, I know that some of you are watching still. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can put them in the comments and I can put them up for Karla to answer. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but I do have some questions that I'm going to start with. That way you guys have time to type out your questions or any like advice she can give you. I think she gave 2 really good resources, which was the Blue Campaign on the Department of
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security, and the Stop app.
Yes.
And that can be directly to your phone. So those are 2 really good resources that we can look into. So let's start with social media, since that's where you kind of ended. What social media outlets are used most often to kind of lure and groom kids?
It's kind of disturbing. So all of the Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of them. There's actually, I can't remember which website has it. I think it's Polaris. Polaris Project has a list, and it says it's actually the top 21 apps that are used by predators. Used by predators to connect and seek out children to exploit.
Okay. Wow. That's scary. Um,
Well,
so
the thing is like you guys, you can actually look up bark.com. It's a online, it's a kind of like a parental control for your phone,
yeah,
okay, for kids. It's a program that you can download to your child's phone. I do know that it costs money, but they have a story on there that that I encourage many people to watch, because a lot of people don't realize how this happens, how it works, or how these people even seek out kids online. So they did this study and they created a fake profile of a 12-year-old girl. Okay. Regular profile. There was nothing revealing about her. There was nothing sexy, or they didn't do any of that. They created a normal 12-year-old girl involved in school activities, and it really was a 30-year-old woman, but they did all this facial reconstructing on, online. I mean, you can do all kind of stuff with computers now. But they made it look like she was legit 12 years old. Within 2 days, there was so many predator type messages coming through on this girl's Instagram page, this fake page, that it took 3 to 4 employees working round the clock just to keep up with the messages. It was that much. And people don't realize that whenever the ads would be posted online for my trafficker to sell me and create those appointments, whatever you want to call it, he used to sing the song Ring My Bell, because I had a bell chime on my phone and it would just constant ring. It never stopped. And people don't realize that there is a great demand for this. People don't realize that. And I mean, I encourage you definitely to check stuff out like this, because it really does paint a clearer picture of how it happens and what it really looks like and what somebody may be going through in those situations, especially a kid. Like, how many times have we ourselves got sent this random message from some dude, that says, "Oh, I think you're hot," or whatever it is. How many kids that are seeking attention in that moment would respond to that in a totally different way than we would? Us, we'd be like, "Oh, dude, you're blocked. Leave me alone," and be done with it. What happens if this is a 12-year-old girl that just got her heart broken for the first time? Then what? I mean, so this is why I go back a lot to having these tough, truthful conversations with our kids, because I think honestly, that's where it's going to start. I was, like I said before, I've said it again, I'll keep saying it. I was not taught this stuff. And I really do truly think that if somebody would have took the time to educate me on healthy relationships, exploitation, what all of this was and looked like, and how it could affect me and all the things to go with it, then, I mean, it's hard to not entertain those what if questions. What if I would have had a different life? What if this, and no, I don't regret anything that has happened in my life, because I would not be at the place I am today to be able to share with you guys information that I'm sharing, because I wouldn't have known any of it. So.
right. Okay, excellent.
Sorry,
Well,
I'll get off
no,
on a
that was good because
tangent.
it reminded me, I saw this and I don't know enough about it to speak on it, but there is a documentary and I'm looking at it right now, Undercover Underage. Have you heard of this yet? And
I
that's supposed to be
haven't.
like on Discovery Channel, Discovery Plus, I'm not sure which
Hmm.
one. But it is a mom who this was happening to her daughter,
Yeah.
and so now she is going undercover, posting pictures and stuff, and they're catching people in all of this. And I think it's episodes long. So I'm definitely going to check that out. But I thought I would mention it. But I did have a question because, I have a background in education. And whenever I heard you talking about the school and like kind of a rotating group of men who were picking you up, it of course was disturbing to me. And then of course I had like that gut check moment of, oh my gosh, did I miss something? Well, how much did I miss? Which is scary. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, did anyone at the school or did a teacher ever kind of talk to you about that there were these different men picking you up constantly?
No, there wasn't. Um, unfortunately, there wasn't. And I think I shared, there was a girl that I kind of entrusted with things that were going on. And, I made her promise me not to say anything. But deep down, I really, really was hoping that she would be strong enough for me to say something, because I didn't feel strong enough or courageous enough to say something whenever it was happening. I never got approached by teachers per se. I did, however, have a lot of the attention of the students, because of what was going on. I was talked about a lot. And I do remember my home ec teacher, I think in 8th grade, right before I got pregnant and all of that. I remember her sitting me down one time, and it had already been going on for so long. Like there was no, in my mind, there was no hope. There was no way out. There was no getting around it. And if it was, then it was going to result in me being, it's hurtful to say this, but taken away from my mom once again.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one thing I didn't think that I could handle. No matter how horrible of a person my mom was, that was my mom. That's all I ever wanted as a kid, was her attention and her love, her affection. That was it. And I wasn't given that, and so knowing that, yes, I probably could have got out of the situation easier, better, whatever you want to call it. At the same time, I was scared to say something, because that would mean, I knew I was a kid, but I still knew that if my mom was once again not doing her job as a mom, that I was going to be taken away again. I knew that. And that was the one thing I didn't want to happen. So I do remember Miss Woodman. I'll never forget her name. She did sit me down and just kind of ask what's going on, kind of thing, but it was never a conversation where I felt like I trusted her enough to say anything. It was more like a, what are you doing? Than what's going on. So I guess maybe it was a lot of the way that she approached it. And maybe I shut down, like, before the conversation could get started. Because instantly, whenever she asked me that, I guess I felt like whatever was going on was actually direct cause of my choices, like a direct result of my choices. So,
yeah. You talked about quotas and punishment and things like that. In that kind of area and arena, were you scared for your life with punishment and quotas?
So punishment, to be specific, meant forced sodomy and abuse. And even today, I still have issues, personal issues. The quota, yeah, I was given a quota, and whenever I actually went back and I explained that things had gotten way worse and that my quota went up to $2,500 a day, and all of those things, it got really bad, and I remember probably the day before I sat in the bathtub and just, kind of almost gave up. I do remember just, it was really hard to get through. Yeah.
Wow. And there's people, your 11-year-old, it might be dealing with that. Your 15-year-old, it doesn't change. The age doesn't change how horrible it is for you.
Right.
But just put it in perspective, how a lack of being able to cope and deal in those moments make it
Yeah.
even worse for someone. Now, we talked about human trafficking, but I wondered, what are the top states? Because you said it's definitely a domestic issue.
Yes.
What are the top states for human trafficking?
So California is actually number 1, Texas is number 2, and Florida is number 3,
Okay.
according to Polaris.
Okay. And you shared some interesting facts about Texas. So would you share that here?
Well, Texas might be the second highest state in active human trafficking cases, but Texas is actually the leading state in the fight against trafficking. Don't mess with Texas, right? So Texas is the first state in our nation to pass a law to deter the purchase of sex. So now, starting September of this year, purchasing sex is now considered a felony rather than a misdemeanor.
And there's a lot of new things that have
Mhm.
gone into effect just even in the last few years. I know for licensure purposes, we are required now to
Mhm.
take training on human trafficking so that we can actively, understand more about it, but also maybe be able to identify it if
Mhm.
it's in front of our face.
Yes.
And you had something to do with that?
Yeah. Sorry about that,
No,
Jessica.
I think that's great. Tell me a little bit about what that was and how that got started.
So I serve as a council member for the Human Trafficking Survivor Leader Councilship for the Office of the Governor of the state of Texas, and we created this group within the governor's office to basically be a voice for survivors. So we've got about 12 different women across the state of Texas that are heavily involved in the fight against trafficking. All of us either run a ministry or work with a ministry or work with an organization. We are all what would be considered a healthy survivor. So they kind of see us as leaders, and they have invited us to the table to basically give our opinions and thoughts on best practices, legislation, just about anything that they have that comes through that office that has to do with human trafficking. They lean on us to really just give input on. It's really, really cool. They also reach out to us whenever there's bigger entities that want to receive training or such as survivor perspective and things like this. So it just kind of makes the topic a little bit more real whenever it's coming from a survivor, is what we have been told. It seems from what the feedback that we have gotten in the past is that those are the most impactful trainings, is whenever it can be related to like real life situation. So that's kind of what a lot of us survivors on this board do. But one of those things is push for legislation. So we've had many, I guess you could call them roundtable discussions with senators, land commissioners, all kinds of really cool, being invited to some really cool spaces at the table to really have a voice for where we think that things can be improved for our state, legislatively or however. So whenever we got to this last legislative session, they had asked our opinion on many different things. And those were just a few that really came up, was the educational pieces for those that could be in direct contact with a survivor. So medical professionals, educators, people in the hospitality industry, transportation industry. I think those are the four that they did. And then, then we have the to deter a buyer. We thought about higher punishment. It's really cool to have a voice at the table for stuff like that, because they really, really do make us feel like our voice matters.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then we talked a little bit before the broadcast about the fact that you have an almost 11-year-old daughter now, and kind of whenever all of this started, you were around that age, and how, you can look at her and see her at that age and know what you were going through at that age, and just share some about that.
I'll just be honest, like I said earlier, I am so, so thankful and grateful that her life looks nothing like mine did. Um, I think a lot of times we as parents, we kind of want our ceiling to be our kids' floor. We want our ceiling to be their baseline where they can start and project from there. And, this very well could have been something extremely generational for us. This could have carried on into her life. And, I'm grateful that even though we have been through some stuff, she's just amazing. She still has her innocence. She has not been through the things that I've been through, nowhere near, like not even close. And it's just really special to see how the change in me reflects onto her too.
Yeah.
Because, there's times that I'll be honest, not every day is a good day for me. I go home and cry sometimes. And, it's really cool to have those moments where your 11-year-old daughter just comes up and she's like, "Where's your phone, Mom? Let's put on some worship music. Nope, we got to pray about this." For my daughter to know that every single thing, any issue, hurt or upset or anything in her life, use prayer, like that's the go-to. What? I couldn't be prouder. I mean, she's so caring, so giving. And these are traits. This is stuff I did not have. And, just to know that she's in a house where mom and dad, there's no drug use present. There is no violence. There is no verbal or physical abuse present. That she sees a healthy relationship with me and my husband. She sees what it is for a man to love a woman kind of example. And, I couldn't want any more for her. I mean, if anything, I'm rich with just what I have there.
Absolutely. It's just so interesting that this is the daughter who was threatened.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And
And
now she is actually, so really cool thing. I don't think I shared with you this, Jessica, before.
Mhm.
So my daughter at 8 years old, she led her first Walk for Freedom. So Walk for Freedom is a worldwide event through A21. It's an awareness event that you're standing to declare abolition, that you're an abolitionist against slavery. My daughter at 8 years old, so the year before COVID, she actually led her first walk. Okay. And she led 520 people, I think, down the streets of San Antonio in just a declaration of freedom for all. And, to see those moments and to see like my daughter fighting for freedom of something that I've experienced, like, look, I haven't cried this whole time. That's going to make me cry because my daughter was appointed through A21 Freedom Chasers here in San Antonio as the first ever junior A21. What did they call her? It was the cutest thing. She's a junior A21 representative. That's what it was. So, and every year since then, she doesn't miss the walks. She loves to go with me on just so many cool events, and just be present. And her heart to help others is just so pure and amazing. So I'm sorry, I'll talk all day about my baby girl.
that's okay. That was really good.
She is so awesome, you guys. And I don't regret anything.
Mhm.
I don't. Whenever I left and went back, it was to protect her, and every bit of it was worth it.
Mhm. And the last thing that we talked about was I asked, whenever you realized that this was going to be something that was going to be around for the rest of your life, that you were going to have to navigate it
Yeah.
alongside of everything else that you're navigating. You said something really profound, and I wondered if you could share that again.
Yeah. I never really, coming out on the other side of this and through the healing and everything, I never really was told that there's this level of healing that you reach that is, oh, you're done. You don't have to go to therapy anymore. You don't have to, talk about this anymore. You don't have to work on yourself anymore. It was never expressed to me that way. So my best friend, the one that actually called me in the middle of my suicide attempt, we now work alongside each other every day. So she is the founder of Mercy Gate Ministries, and the programs that we have in place have been built around the care that I needed. So really, really cool. Whenever she first started walking alongside of me, it was never okay, Karla, once you reach this level of spirituality, then, you're good. No, it was always told and instilled in me from the very beginning of this journey that you will always be in process. you will always be able to notice something internally and externally that you can work on. There is always going to be each day to strive to be better than you were the day before. And so it's never been like a belief of mine that, oh, once I reach this point, like I'm good. No, it's never been that. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to every single day work on something else to try and be better than I was the day before.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up. That's a wonderful message. And I'm just so grateful you came and visited with us. I know there will be a lot of people who hear this and will take some of your action steps, and we appreciate it. So, this concludes episode number 2. Again, thank you, Karla.
Of
And we
course.
will see you guys next week. Bye bye.